I want to start off with a little bit of national news before we get into California specific news, but we just found out that Donald Trump has been so gracious as to drop his $10 billion lawsuit against his own federal government and instead offer up a compromise, a generous compromise where he only pillaged U.S. taxpayers to the tune of $1.7 billion so that he could pay January 6th insurrectionists. So before we get into the California stuff, can I have your reaction to this latest move by Trump?
I mean, Trump's a criminal. I got 8 million signatures to impeach him in 2017 and 2018 because been in enough boardrooms to know a crook. He's a crook. This is a crooked, completely illegal thing to do, and it's completely consistent with his behavior throughout his first and second terms. But in the second terms, his grifting has moved to a completely different level. But it's consistent and it's completely illegal. And this is the idea of granting himself $1.7 billion of taxpayers' money. It's a new level, but he's only going to get worse, honestly, Brian. And so, this is completely wrong.
As a wealthy businessman who would use the tricks that he learned to I think his exact words, to be greedy for the nation instead of being greedy for himself. A lot of your success is the fact that you are a wealthy businessman. And so for people who see that and say, well, that's a cautionary tale then, what would your reaction to those people be?
Look, I started a business from scratch. He inherited $450 million from his poppy. I've said I started a business and walked away from it and left billions of dollars on the table. And my wife and I have said, we're giving the money away while we're alive. He keeps stealing money. He's not a business person. He's a thief. That's a different thing, Brian. If you look at, he's one of the people who I think he went bankrupt 4 times in casinos. How do you do that?
Yeah.
You're the house. It's like, that's a math problem. So to a very large extent, he is someone who has consistently been a crook. He continues to be a crook. I've never been a crook. I built a business and said, I care about other things much more, and we're going to use the money to push progressive causes and protect working people and protect the natural world. He also has 2 ears and 2 eyes, but that doesn't make us the same person either.
Yeah. All right. So I want to go into a few of the priorities that I have in California. But before we do that, I want to give you the opportunity to let me know what your priorities are in California as you run this campaign.
Look, I've been very clear about this. Biggest problem in California is people can't afford to live in California anymore. So it's about, the buzzword is affordability, but it's really about costs at the end of the month. And that starts with housing. It goes to healthcare. It goes to electricity rates. It goes to how much we're paying at the pump, and it goes to food. And in every one of those, I have a specific policy solution. Many of them involve taking on corporate special interests that are driving up the costs and are feasting off California's misery. And I've also said, I'm the person in this race and the only person who will admit to be wanting to tax billionaires like me more, close corporate tax loopholes, and get the money to working people. We're the richest state and the richest country in the world, and we have the highest poverty rate in the United States of America. That doesn't seem like success to me.
So what does success look like at the end of your first 4-year term?
Well,
if you had some benchmarks that you could point to, and I've asked this question to mayoral candidates, for example, as it relates to homelessness, and I've heard Nithya Raman tell me that she wants to see 50% reduction in homelessness in LA by the time the Olympics rolls around, 100% reduction in those encampments by the end of her first term, and so she was able to offer up some concrete examples, viability notwithstanding. What would some metrics be for you that you would point to as success?
Long term, the way we're going to drive down housing costs, both rent and home ownership, is by producing houses much more inexpensively. And we have 5 points on this. I don't think we have enough time, but I'll say this. We're going to build 1 million houses. We're going to make it possible for people to buy a house and to afford rent. I've been saying we're going to create local competition for the electric monopolies that dominate this state and charge us twice as much as the rest of the United States. And we're going to drive down the cost by 25%. That's a metric. We are going to close a corporate tax loophole and use the money part for healthcare to fill in the hole from HR1, Mr. Trump's throwing people off Medi-Cal, and partly for education. And we're going to use that education money to hire, train, and support fantastic teachers so that our kids get better outcomes. And we're going to go back to being a top 10 education state. Those are 3 things right off the bat that, to me, I could keep going. Honestly, I'm for single payer healthcare. You should, I'm sitting here thinking of all the things we're for single payer healthcare. We have by far, Brian, our campaign and our website has by far the most detailed policy prescriptions of how to change California. And we're not shy about it. And many of them involve structural change and change to the control that corporate special interests have. And that's why corporate special interests are spending tens of millions of dollars against me. And that's why billionaires are supporting everybody in this race but me, because they know that I'm the only person here who's really for structural change for working people to make this state affordable and, to sort of rebuild, rejuvenate house you can afford to buy.
In terms of building up housing, and especially this metric hitting 1 million houses built, to what extent does, as we head toward the 2030 census and the prospect of California losing electoral votes, and not just losing them, but losing them to a state like Texas or Idaho, for example, to what extent is that important as well in all of this to make sure that California retains kind of its stature as a state that has 54 electoral votes and therefore has such an outsized impact in the presidential election?
Well, what I'm really interested in, Brian, is for Californians' lives to be materially improved by their government. And I believe that if we create the society I'm describing, which is so much more positive for people, that reinvigorates the idea of California and the California dream, and that we have a different vision for the 21st century, everybody around the country and everybody around the world is going to go, you know what? I want that. I want a successful society that has free healthcare, great schools, basically an incredibly beautiful place, and as diverse as possibly could be imagined. I want that, because that's the way you're supposed to be living in the 21st century. And I think that the job is to make sure that happens, and everything else will follow.
So one of the points of criticism that folks have of California is the fact that it's exceedingly difficult to build infrastructure here, not just housing, but we obviously have this train that was supposed to go from Los Angeles to San Francisco. What we ended up with was a train that went from the bustling metropolises of Merced to Bakersfield, and even then we don't have anything running right now. And so can you diagnose the issue